My boyfriend told our research team I abandoned the mission. So I forwarded the invoice where he charged a $2,000 men-only retreat to my name. The base kicked him out. I stayed. His mess didn't. When we first got assigned to the base, it felt like we were stepping into someone else's life. The cliffs were jagged, the wind smelled like salt and old wood, and the nearest town was an hour away if the tide cooperated. But we were excited. Naive, maybe, but hopeful. My name's Erin. I'm 31. I've been a marine biologist for almost a decade, but this was my first long-term field rotation. 6 months, just me, Chris, and a half-dozen other researchers packed into a coastal station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. Chris is 35 and works in sustainability tech. Well, consulting, as he liked to call it, meaning he advised startups on eco-strategies and occasionally flew to San Francisco for panels that no one really watched. But he was smart, organized, and when we first moved into the base housing, we made a pact. Everything split 50-50. Lab work, chores, grocery runs, all of it. You handle the data, he said, as we unpacked lab equipment into sagging metal drawers. I'll take care of the logistical headaches. It sounded fair. I was better with messy field notes and aquatic samples. He was better with forms, shipments, and negotiating with bureaucrats over email. We shared cooking and cleaning. We even made a laminated chart, just for laughs, of who did what on which days. For the first few weeks, it worked. We got up at 5:30, sipped instant coffee in silence, and tackled our routines. I scrubbed barnacle samples and logged coral decay stats. He confirmed supply shipments, organized freezer labels, checked diesel levels. We were tired, but happy. Then, he got the grant. It wasn't huge. A supplemental stipend from a green energy foundation he'd been advising for months. It bumped his title to lead consultant and gave him a nice little raise, enough to cover a few new gadgets and some higher-end freeze-dried food. At first, I was happy for him, but then the I'm swamped comments started. He stopped logging deliveries on the whiteboard, missed a supply run, said he'd been up late catching up on reports and could I handle breakfast cleanup? Sure, I said. It was probably a one-off, but then he bailed on freezer restock, didn't rotate the food stores. The fridge sat half empty for 3 days before I finally hiked down to the dock myself and did the inventory by headlamp. When I brought it up, gently, he just smiled and said, "You're better at managing the little things anyway." That's when I felt it. The shift. The pact wasn't broken all at once. It was more like dry rot in a wooden beam, nothing obvious, just slow, quiet decay. Every time he handed off a task, he did it with a kind of casual authority, like I should have seen it coming. I told myself it was temporary. We were on rotation. Life was unpredictable. But in my gut, I knew, something had changed. And it wasn't just the supply list. The lab smelled wrong. It hit me the second I unlatched the cooler, an earthy, sour funk that didn't belong. I leaned in closer, heart already sinking. The preservation jars were fogged over, cloudy with green-black patches clinging to the inside. Contaminated. 3 weeks of field samples, gone. I found the sterilizer tray half-filled, lukewarm, and untouched. The timer was blinking, but the cycle hadn't been run. I checked the logbook. No initials. No dates. Just a scribbled note on the corner of the page, "We'll finish later." It was his handwriting. When I confronted him, he didn't even look up from his laptop. "Seriously?" I said, holding up the tray. "You were supposed to sterilize these the night before last. They're useless now." Chris let out a breathy little laugh. "You're better at the detail stuff anyway." That stopped me cold. "Detail stuff?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "This isn't reorganizing a pantry, Chris. This is the entire study." He shrugged. "You're the scientist. I figured you'd catch it." I just stared at him. For a second, I didn't even know how to respond. There was no apology, not even an ounce of regret. Just the same laid-back shrug, like he'd dropped a spoon and figured someone else would pick it up. Later that week, the fridge ran empty again. I reminded him, again, that it was his turn to do the supply run. He just leaned back, stretched his arms, and said, "You're better at rationing, better at rationing, better at details. Better at keeping everything from falling apart," while he floated around like a guy who'd accidentally been promoted. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I got up at 2 in the morning and cleaned the entire lab. I reorganized the samples, scrubbed the prep counters, relabeled the refrigerated stock. I emptied the trash, bleached the floors, and restocked the shelves in alphabetical order. Then I moved to the kitchen. 3 hours later, the cabinets were cleaned, the fridge restocked, and every damn dish had been washed by hand because the generator was sputtering again and the dishwasher was acting up. I didn't do it because I wanted to. I did it because if I didn't, no one else would. By sunrise, I was exhausted and furious. When Chris strolled in, yawning and scratching his chest like some cartoon version of a busy man, I confronted him. "We need to talk." He blinked at me, already grabbing the French press. "Can this wait until after coffee?" "No, it can't." I told him everything, how his neglect had cost weeks of work, how he kept brushing off responsibility, how I was the one holding it all together while he played pretend. His response? "Jesus, Erin," he said, pouring his coffee without looking at me. "You're making this into a big deal. Chill, chill." I didn't say anything after that. I just walked out. But inside, something cracked. Not loud or obvious. Just a hairline fracture in the foundation, but I felt it, and I knew it wouldn't stay small for long. The next morning, I made coffee in silence. I didn't bother asking if he wanted any, just brewed one mug for me. When Chris wandered in, I didn't look up. I slid the spreadsheet across the counter, already open on the shared tablet. "What's this?" he asked, wiping sleep from his eyes. "A new plan," I said. "If I'm taking on more responsibilities, I'll need to adjust my field hours. And since I'll be spending less time on the research side, you'll need to use part of your stipend to cover the operational gaps." He blinked at me like I'd just spoken another language. "I'm sorry, what?" "It's just simple exchange," I said, calm, precise. "I'm covering more of your load. You compensate for the imbalance. Either in time or money." He scoffed, literally scoffed. What kind of partner needs compensation to be supportive? That was it, right there. The line he thought would shame me back into place. The one he'd probably picked up from some all-hands Zoom or a dinner with his new thought leader friends. Real partners don't keep score. Real love is unconditional. Real equals don't ask to be paid. But I didn't flinch. "I'm not asking for a paycheck," I said. "I'm talking about labor exchange. My time is finite. It has value. If I'm spending it managing your share of the work, something else has to give." He didn't say anything, just stood there, mug half lifted, stunned. Like I'd exposed something he hadn't realized he'd been hiding, maybe not even from me, but from himself. Because the truth was ugly. It wasn't about him being too busy, or too tired. It wasn't even about fairness. It was about convenience. He liked it when I handled things. He liked being the guy with the fancy job title and the empty hands. He liked watching me patch the cracks while pretending they weren't spreading. And now I wasn't playing along. That silence between us? It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. He knew exactly what I was saying, and what it meant. This wasn't about stress. It was about power. And I had just taken it back. I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at me when I said compensation. Like I'd said a dirty word. Like it threatened him. That night, after dinner, I asked him something I'd been holding in for weeks. "Has this got anything to do with your new crew?" He paused, midway through scraping his plate into the compost bin. "What do you mean? Your calls. Your Slack chats. All those meetings with the resilience and leadership guys you keep name-dropping. You think maybe being around them has shifted the way you see us?" He frowned, forced a laugh. "That's ridiculous." I didn't blink. "Is it?" He dropped the fork into the sink a little harder than necessary. "Look, a real partner wouldn't complain about pitching in." There it was. The phrase. Slipped out raw and unfiltered. I stepped in, slow and steady. "I'm not complaining about work. I'm pointing out the imbalance. You agreed to split this life with me, but you've been sliding away from it ever since that grant hit your inbox." He turned toward me, arms crossed. "You're just bitter. You care more about money now than anything else." My mouth opened, then closed again. I was so stunned by the laziness of it, the obvious deflection. "You really think this is about money?" I said. "I'm the one staying up late to sterilize samples. I'm the one counting cans and calculating power usage. I don't want a paycheck. I want a partner." He didn't answer, just stood there, staring at me like I'd changed. But I hadn't changed. I just stopped shrinking. "You know what your problem is?" I said, voice low now. "You want the credit for being supportive without actually showing up. You want to be admired for balancing a shared life, while I'm the one holding the line." He shook his head. "You're twisting this." I stepped closer. "No, I'm untwisting it. I'm laying it out in plain language, because I think you've gotten comfortable with the idea that I'll keep picking up the slack if you just keep acting like I'm the one being unreasonable." He was silent again, and this time, there was no confusion in his eyes, just fear, because he knew I saw it now. The leeching, the quiet reassigning of labor, dressed up in productivity buzzwords. The guilt-tripping masked as affection. The gradual repositioning of me from equal partner to unpaid support staff. I looked at him one last time and said the thing I'd been holding in. "I'm digging for the bare minimum and still can't find it." And then I walked away. I didn't slam a door or yell or throw a single thing. I just packed. I folded each shirt with clinical precision, slid each field notebook into its case, unpinned my name from the workstation corkboard and dropped it into my duffel like it meant nothing. Maybe it did. Chris watched from the couch. Smug, half amused, like he was humoring a tantrum, like I'd tire myself out and crash back into our routine by nightfall. "You're really doing this?" he asked eventually. I didn't answer, just zipped my jacket and went back for my boots. He laughed under his breath. "You'll regret this." Those words should have hurt. Maybe a few weeks ago, they would have. But now? I just let out a bitter little laugh that tasted like salt and old air. "I already regret staying this long," I said without turning around. I loaded everything into the truck. Every backpack, every hard drive, every piece of gear I paid for myself while he justified rerouting grant funds for networking expenses. I didn't leave a note. I didn't leave a gap for him to squeeze through later and rewrite the ending. I was done. The tide was out when I left the base. The sky was still gray, that low-hanging kind that made the whole coastline feel suspended in time. I didn't look back, because I knew what I'd see, him, still in that worn-out hoodie, arms folded, pretending this was temporary. He still thought I'd fold, that I'd spin the truck around after a few days and come crawling back, apologizing for overreacting. But there's a kind of silence that happens when a person's finally done talking themselves into one more chance. And that was the silence I left him in. When the base disappeared from my rearview mirror, I felt something shift in my chest. Not relief, not sadness, just space. For the first time in months, there was space in my life where his excuses used to be, and that was enough to keep driving. A generic subject line from the grant office, account discrepancies, please review. I almost deleted it, thought maybe it was some leftover admin error from my departure, but I opened it, and inside was an invoice. Unpaid equipment fees, logged under my name, charges I never authorized, orders I never saw. The total? Close to $3,000. I stared at the screen, blinking. There had to be a mistake. I called the base administrator. We'd shared more than a few late-night cups of tea in the lab over the years. She sounded hesitant when she picked up. Hey Aaron, I was actually wondering when you'd call. That's when the dam broke. He hadn't just failed to log expenses, he'd logged them under me, submitted orders under my credentials, rerouted communal supply funds to cover personal gear upgrades, satellite tracker, high-end drone for data visuals, access pass for a men-only resilience leadership retreat in Big Sur, listed under team morale development, except no one else on the team had gone. No one else even knew. I pulled up our shared receipts from the cloud drive, tracing the breadcrumbs. One by one, things that felt off at the time started snapping into place. The supply orders that never matched our needs. The equipment that showed up with no explanation. The delayed reimbursements he kept brushing off. It had been me, my signature, my name, my budget line. He didn't just stop pulling his weight, he used my trust as a cover to steal from the work we built together. At first, the rage hit, loud and hot and seething, but under that, buried deeper, was something worse. Recognition. I'd seen this before, in small ways, quiet ways. The accidental shifting of credit during meetings. The way my notes turned into his talking points. The way he'd smile through my exhaustion and say, well, you're just better at managing chaos. He hadn't been overwhelmed. He'd been calculating, using the chaos of isolation to slide things into my lap, using the intimacy of partnership to mask what he was really doing, taking, always taking. My hand shook as I typed my response to the grant office, attaching proof, logs, and a formal correction request. It wasn't about clearing my name anymore. It was about ending the story he'd tried to write without me noticing. One where I did the work, and he reaped the benefits. One where I was just the background support character in his rugged, self-made sustainability narrative. But I'd left that story already. Now, I was writing my own. One of the other researchers sent it with a one-line note, thought you should see this. It was from Chris. A long, rambling group email sent to the full base distribution list. Part update, part open letter, part veiled pity party. He didn't mention me by name, but I was everywhere in it. I know the past few weeks have been challenging, he wrote. Transitions are never easy, especially when people you thought you could rely on suddenly decide they're done contributing. He called it an unfortunate breakdown in communication, said he hoped future collaborators would understand the value of patience in isolated conditions, said I'd abandoned the mission. I didn't reply. Not to the researcher who sent it, not to anyone, but more messages started trickling in, screenshots from people still on the base, little clips from social media, Reddit posts under throwaway usernames, but the tone was unmistakable. Good women just don't want to commit anymore. Traditional values are under attack, even in science. Resilience isn't built on checking out when things get hard. He was rebranding himself, as a victim, as a martyr, as some stoic, misunderstood field guy left behind by the emotionally unstable woman who couldn't hack it. But the thing about telling stories in public, you don't control the comments. And the replies came fast. Bro, did she leave you or escape you? Man's out here giving emotional abuse vibes in paragraph format. Love how he calls it a collaborator transition, like she's a defective intern and not a whole-ass partner who bailed on his nonsense. Every time someone sent me another link, another screenshot, I just added it to a folder on my desktop called Narrative Management Attempt. No rage, no tears, just quiet documentation. He could twist the plot all he wanted, dress it up with buzzwords and selective edits, turn me into the unstable one who checked out. But I didn't need to defend myself. The story was telling itself just fine without me. And that silence? That was my answer. No rebuttals. No comments. No need to weigh in while he scrambled to repaint himself as the victim. I didn't lift a finger. Because the truth? It was already starting to rot through the shiny paint on his version of things. Just 2 lines. He's gone. Program flagged his accounts and kicked it up the chain. I didn't ask for more. But she sent the full update anyway, like she knew I needed the closure, even if I never said it out loud. Turns out, the grant office didn't just stop at the invoice. They launched a full audit, found inconsistencies in how Chris had reported equipment usage, discrepancies in fuel logs, unapproved expenses, some charged under my name, some under his. The higher-ups weren't amused. He was asked to step down, then officially removed from the sustainability program roster, blacklisted from the next funding cycle, quietly removed from the invite list for that fancy resilience conference he used to talk about like it was church. And with nowhere else to land, he went home. Not to some new eco-startup or speaking gig. Home. Back to his parents' place in Colorado Springs. The one with the half-finished deck and the fading vinyl siding. He was back where he started, but worse. Now, he had the weight of his own lies following him like a smell that wouldn't wash off. Meanwhile, I was still here. The base was quieter without him. Not just in sound, in energy. It felt cleaner somehow. Lighter. I took long walks along the cliffs again, collected samples, cleaned out the lab fridge without gagging. Every data log was filed, cross-checked, and color-coded. I slept through the night for the first time in months. One afternoon, I walked through the empty corridors and opened the main dry storage closet, the one he used to organize and then forget about. Shelves were orderly now. Labels made sense. Nothing was missing. I stood there in the silence and smiled, not because I was happy he'd failed, but because his mess no longer lived here. I did. I stayed. I rebuilt. And this time, I wasn't doing it to hold someone else up. I was doing it for me. For the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I wanted to be. And for once, I didn't have to explain that to anybody.